We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. Subscribe and follow on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where you get exclusive videos from the show weekly. Links to all the social media sites at bookedonrock.com. Lisa Torem is a returning guest to talk about her book, Tori Amos, Every Album, Every Song. This is part of the excellent on-track series of books by Sonicbond Publishing. You may recall Tori Amos gained fame in 1992 with the release of her album Little Earthquakes, including the singles Silent All These Years and Crucify. That was followed by 1994's Under the Pink, which featured the hit singles Cornflake Girl and God. She's been nominated for Grammys. She was the first female artist to chart in the Billboard Top 10 in classical, alternative, and rock genres simultaneously. We'll talk about Tori's career, starting with her late 1980s synth pop beginnings, which you may not even realize existed, right through to her 2021 album Ocean to Ocean. I put together a playlist of Tori Amos on the show notes page. It includes all the songs that Lisa talks about in this interview, so listen to the music while we go through the interview or listen afterwards. It's an amazing body of work, and we're going to get to it all now with author Lisa Torem. Hello, Lisa. Hello again. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. You were on to talk about your book, Billy Joel, Every Album, Every Song. Now we're going to talk about Tori Amos. And the book is titled Tori Amos, Every Album, Every Song. It's part of Sonicbond's On-Track series. And I obviously know who Tori Amos is. But this book helped me to discover her whole body of work. In the 90s, of course, she was all over the radio, especially modern rock radio. But what a body of work. When did you first discover the music of Tori Amos, and what was your reaction when you first heard it?
Well, I actually read about Tori in a black and white fanzine, which I'll get to a little later, why I didn't know she had this flaming red hair, at the dentist's office. And I'd read a profile, and I was very impressed with not only her music, but this humanitarian outreach that she does. She has set up an organization called RAIN, which is for survivors of sexual violence. And she's like, it's in every city, American city. And so she's done a lot. She's very involved with bands in every community. And I was also really touched by her piano arrangements. You know, she's had this very strong classical background. Her arrangements are so evocative, and her vocal inflection is varied. It's so diverse. When I first heard the line, I put my hand in my father's glove from the song Winter from Little Earthquakes, I was really transported back to my own childhood because I had a close relationship with my father. And so it just brought back these memories of being a little girl and carrying around his briefcase and putting my hands in his big overcoat and smelling the Old Spice aftershave and things like that. And I love the way she built up the sonic landscape. It reminded me of the melody. I had a little wind-up jewelry box, and I had a little tiny ballerina spinning on the top, you know, that kind of very gentle music. But then Tori kind of leads us through these stages of her childhood, creating this windstorm of like, you know, now you have to leave. Now, you know, it's up to you to take on this whole life. So yeah, I really like with her debut, Little Earthquakes, she had very relatable themes, coming of age and loss and identity, and it's very easy to relate to such a personal album.
What a backstory, too. 2.5 years old, she could memorize piano melodies, earned a Peabody Institute scholarship at Johns Hopkins University at the age of 5, youngest member ever admitted. Can you give us a brief bio of Tori, where she's from, and all the musical styles that she was exposed to growing up?
So she was born in Newton, North Carolina. So she's a Southern gal in some ways. She moved with her parents, sister, and brother to Baltimore, and when she was about 2. Her father was a Methodist minister. Her mother, Mary, was a homemaker, was a very poetic person. And they listened to, you know, standards like Fats Waller and Nat King Cole. So, you know, you could see where she would get that piano in her soul. But like, she was a natural musician. By the age of 3, her parents discovered she could play back a musical piece by ear, even after hearing the piece once. Her siblings took lessons, but she kind of just got on the horse herself and taught herself to play. She would also end up helping out with the church choir. So, she had this background also with liturgical music, hymns. She would use this later, or maybe all through her body of work, because she, was just always open to new ideas.
Where did she get her stage name from, Tori Amos?
Well, her birth name was Myra Ellen Amos. She used Ellen as a stage name. And then one of her friend's boyfriends said that reminded him of the Tory pine tree, which is, oh, okay, really? What does that mean? But she's about my height. She's about 5'2". But I'm guessing that the boy was alluding to the gracefulness and stature that she has. I've met Tori twice, and I can really testify that she's this very bouncy, lively kind of persona,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. She had some traumatic experiences in her life, too. 11 years old, expelled by Johns Hopkins University. What happened there? I love this story because this is the rock and roll side of Tori.
This is the rock and roll side. So she discovered that she loved rock, and she discovered great groups like Led Zeppelin and The Doors, and of course they wrote original music. So here she is in a pretty strict environment, and they're trying to turn you into a concert pianist, most likely. And concert pianists are taught to interpret other people's music, and she wanted to compose. And she had a great ear. She wanted to use her ear, but that was not necessarily encouraged. She wasn't excited about sight reading, but she was excited about hearing other people's compositions, writing her own compositions. She was asked to leave because they could see she wasn't going to go for it. And she's just at that age, too, where it's like, hormones and everything. She's like, what am I doing here? It was a painful goodbye because, she was on scholarship and it was a big deal. But nevertheless, her parents really believed in her abilities. So he was sending demos out of her work. And at 13, she started doing piano bars in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore with her father chaperoning. And she was very much embraced by the LGBTQ community and got hired at a place called Mr. Smith's. There are also these indicators that she was meant to be on this musical path. She won a talent contest in high school. And in 1980, she and her brother Michael co-wrote a song about the Baltimore Orioles. And, and came away with a 7-inch record.
Yeah, so, well, I know they won the World Series that year. I remember 19.
Probably why.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. Now, when she's in Los Angeles, she was a victim of sexual assault, and then she alludes to this in interviews in later years, and it would be addressed in her songs, including Me and a Gun from her first solo album, 1992's Little Earthquakes. But before that came the self-titled album she released with her band, Why Can't Tori Read, in 1988. I had no idea about this. I listened to it, and what a trip. I mean, this is late 80s all the way. So you got some famous names in there. You've got guys from Cheap Trick, from Guns N' Roses in there. It was under the Atlantic Records label. Can you talk about this project? Why didn't it become the success that she and the label had hoped it would be?
Well, first of all, she was going through a lot of stuff, and she's in LA. She had lost her band. So she had guys that would kind of come by in the sessions. Matt Sorum, Guns N' Roses drummer, Steve Catan, guitarist, kind of came in and out, Robin Zander, Cheap Trick. But she had lost an actual band. So she lost that support. And she didn't really have advisors to say, well, what's her image going to be? So, or to really, I felt like the material was not necessarily suited for her voice. So I think at times she pushed her voice too much, trying to be sort of very, rough and tough kind of entertainer. And then in terms of the cover, and I think she got way too much flack for this, but she was shown wearing sort of this provocative bustier, and she was wielding a pirate sword. So she came across like a heavy metal singer, and a Billboard critic made sort of a derogatory remark, which of course, journalists kind of spread this and that. So that didn't bode well. And the album was not promoted well. Musical trends had also changed by the time the album had come out, especially in the area of dance. Nevertheless, there were some interesting ideas, like she was using bagpipes in a song called Etienne. But I think the album was kind of missing that glue that every album requires. But interestingly, in 2017, when Native Invader got released, they re-released this album, and fans rediscovered the remastered digital reissue. And Tori ultimately made peace with it, and she even started using some of the songs live. So it's
okay. Yeah, there are some good songs on there. And for those who are curious as to what it sounds like, I mean, it definitely is. It's rock and roll, but there's synth pop in there.
Yes.
It's like alternative rock synth pop. It's like late 80s. I don't know what you could compare it to, but It's worth a listen. It's not a throwaway album. It's just it wasn't her. But 4 years later, we get the debut solo release, Little Earthquakes. The album cover image on Why Can't Tori Read, that presented her with a challenge. So now she has to convert the non-believers. Little Earthquakes is a success, both critically and commercially, thanks to the top 30 alternative rock radio singles, Silent All These Years and Crucify. It also includes Me and a Gun, China, and Winter, the song you mentioned. At the time, synthesizers were the keyboards of the day, the piano, not in fashion, but Tori, she worked hard to break through that barrier. What do you credit the success of this album to?
Well, let me just back up because it's important to acknowledge what she was up against, because the CEOs said, well, you know what? We've got people like Tracy Chapman and Suzanne Vega happening right now. Can you not play the piano? How about playing guitar? I mean, it really shocked me when I read this. Tori Amos, this woman has started, she started playing as a little girl and has all this great technical and emotional ability to play. Like, why don't you just play guitar? So she was kind of put in that odd position. So they were kind of trying to put her in a corner. She was working with her then partner, an engineer named Eric Ross. So she had to give another demo to the label, and she came up with these beautiful vocal and piano arrangements on a very limited budget. And she had learned a lot about herself in terms of creating a truth. She wanted to be very genuine for this album. She wrote so many personal things. The great thing about Silent All These Years, it is so timeless. It's become like an anthem. It became an anthem, for example, when there was the Anita Hill hearings for sexual harassment. It was a song that was used, but it's become an anthem for really any, groups that are underrepresented. It's about finding your voice. So any marginalized group can really easily internalize the ballad. The songs were just grade A songs. Precious Things rests on one of Tori's most compelling piano riffs. She's just expressing herself with no holds barred. She's using a lot of poetic devices, repetition, onomatopoeia. She's stressing certain syllables, and she's getting her point across very clearly and organically. And Eric Ross would often tape Tori during practice sessions and help her flesh out arrangements. I think this is important to note because imagine Tori Amos, such a free-spirited artist, playing and rehearsing and coming up with new ideas. And you need that person that sneaks up and has a tape recorder like, wait a minute, this riff would work. So in some cases, he'd go back and say, you got to keep this riff. This is great. And then Mark Hawley, who would later become her husband, an engineer, lead engineer, he would also let the tape run because she'd come up with these brilliant nuggets, instrumental fragments that would otherwise be lost to the world. There's such variety on this album. Like, for example, there's the song Happy Phantom, which one of the things that I think Tori does is she kind of misleads us in a sort of a fun way. I mean, you hear that song and she has these lines like, there's Judy Garland taking Buddha by the hand. They say Confucius does his crossword with a pen. And there's sort of these cultural inferences, and it's great, almost like humorous piano. It reminds me of like Thelonious Monk or one of those jazz great guys.
Right.
It's really, but the thing is that it's about death. She's got this really fascinating spin on sometimes very dark subjects. And if you didn't know some of the content, you just go, oh, this is fun to dance to.
Yeah.
And I see that all through her discography.
The follow-up is 1994's Under the Pink, debuts at number 1 in the UK, number 12 in the US. The single God reaches the Hot 100 at number 72. On the alternative rock charts, it goes all the way to number 1. Cornflake Girl reaches number 12. This is a thought-provoking one, and I guarantee you anybody who tries to guess what it's about is going to be wrong. And you thought there was a connection to the Beatles, but it's not. Where does the title come from, and what is this song about?
Well, yeah, because I thought it was from that line in I Am the Walrus, but it had nothing to do with, well, by the way, Tori did get a spot on a Kellogg's Cornflake commercial.
That's great.
Fact, right? But she has said in interviews, everyone is pink under the skin, and that is what I wanted to express, and that pink has healing properties. I think in Under the Pink, she's really exploring the human psyche that kind of exists between these boundaries and the similarities we have and our capability of being healed. The narratives are much more abstract here, I believe, than on Little Earthquakes. We're kind of asked to gaze below the surface of the lyrics more, and the backstories are haunting, and very often they belie the beats. For like Cornflake Girl that we just talked about, Tori had been reading about female mutilation and how females in a given community betray other females. At the same time, she's talking more about growing up with girls that she called either raisin girls, which were the true blue girls, or the cornflake girls, who were the two-faced girls. So we're kind of getting a glimpse of Tori growing up, and there's these wild backstories. She was also drawing inspiration from artists like Salvador Dali and E. Cummings. And the other thing is, as we go along, there's this fun part of Tori that loves words. We're going to hear examples, like a song called Spies. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to review Ocean to Ocean because my book was due, but that's sort of a linguistic wordplay salad that I love. But, it will find, like, through her discography, there's this very lighthearted side of her too, which is playful, and she likes to play with words, and you almost feel like she made up a word, and maybe she did, but you got to Google it and find out.
Right. And Ocean to Ocean, that's the last album she put out, 2021, that came out. Yeah. The track God, some intense guitar effects on this. Talk about that, and what is Tori singing about on this one?
Oh, well, she had this very intense religious upbringing, which she really was questioning afterwards. And so, it was really she was pointedly asking in this song, God, what's the big deal here? Like, who are you? And why should I be such a faithful believer? I'm not saying literally what she was saying, but I think she was really kind of speaking out loud and saying, what is this thing that I was raised to believe in? And she also got very in tune. I think at the same time she was saying, are there other ways to explore spirituality other than just blindly accepting what's in front of her? So she's tapping into other forms of spirituality. Nature is becoming a source. And she's, like I said, she's questioning monotheism. As far as the guitarist Steve Catan was using what they call a rat pedal and creating these very distorted sounds with kind of, simple amp setup. And Tori was kind of worried that this record wouldn't get airplay because it was, it was sort of this noise factor in a way. But when she submitted alternate versions to the label, this is the one they chose. So they were fine with it. And it's really pretty powerful. The video, by the way, is whoa. It's really.
Yeah. It's the guitar work is effective on that track. That might be my favorite from the album, although Cornflake Girl, man. And now whenever I listen to it, I was listening to it today, I think about it in a whole different way now, just now knowing what it is that she's writing about on that. And there's a beautiful shot of Tori on the cover of that album, Under the Pink. But on the follow-up album, 1996's Boys for Pele, we see Tori with a rifle, and she's sitting in a rocking chair on the porch of an old wooden building. One of her legs is out of her pants, flung over the side of the chair. A snake coils around the chair, and a large rooster hangs from the roof of the porch. This makes sense when you listen to the music. What is the album's overall concept? And where did she come up with that album title? It's not about soccer. It's not a soccer.
No.
That's what I thought at first. I'm like, is she a soccer fan?
No, so Tori was traveling in Hawaii, and she was learning about the volcano goddess Pele. And so the volcano then becomes a metaphor for females stealing fire from men and also creating their own burning flames. And I think she's also getting us to think about this whole concept of feminine beauty and how the American industry just, wants women to spend money because their skin's not glossy enough and their hair is not beautiful, and nothing is beautiful enough. We have to keep spending money. So I think it was sort of this way of saying, this is the other part of our life. This is who I am. I'm not the glamour queen that maybe you have seen. And so I think she's questioning the concept of beauty and the conflicts it creates for women feeling less than or objectified. But it was also her first self-produced recording. And there was a lot of experimentation, harpsichord, clavichord, harmonium, but there was also brass and orchestral instruments and a choir. So she's really going full spectrum. Now, she also experimented with psychedelics. And during this time, she attended a ayahuasca ceremony with a shaman, okay? And so the song Father Lucifer came out of that experience. She had this vision of meeting the devil. And her father gave her quite a hard time. He's like, are you you're writing another song about me, Tori? Well, truthfully, she had written quite a bit. And she says, no, Dad, I really wasn't. With Father Lucifer, I think interestingly, in terms of the structure, it's, we're thinking about sort of meeting the devil, but it's a really interesting piece. So it's like a classical piece. She's moving in the left hand and third, fourth, and fifths. The melody is so pretty, and she's got these little grace notes in the melody. So we get us a bit of a surprise because, it's about the devil, but it's such a light-hearted song. Hey Jupiter is another one of my favorites. This is a breakup song. She had broken up with Eric Ross, and it's so from the gut. No one's picking up the phone. Guess it's clear he's gone. There's another song called In the Springtime of His Voodoo, which I call a wild bronco. Her vocal sound, her voice just ebbs and flows. And then over this walking bass line, she goes full strength into her head voice. So again, we just have so much variety on this album. We have a song called Mr. Zebra, which is a very fun kind of song. And then we have Blood Roses, which is, again, kind of alluding to female mutilation. And she's playing harpsichord, which is really quite beautiful. So those are some of the songs that I really cherish.
The album includes the single Caught a Light Sneeze. That reached number 60 on Billboard's Hot 100, number 13 on the alternative rock chart. 2 more albums before the decade ends for Tori. From the Choir Girl Hotel, that comes out in 1998 and includes the number 49 single Spark, which I love. That's my favorite from that album.
Beautiful.
Yeah, number 54 single Jackie's Strength. She married engineer Mark Hawley, like you mentioned. Earlier in the year, she meets drummer Matt Chamberlain, and they hit it off immediately.
Yes.
He's part of this album. He's also on the follow-up, 1999's To Venus and Back, which includes the single Bliss, a double album with 1-disc studio recordings, the second live recordings. And like Tori said, and you quote in the book, you've got to know when it's time to turn the page. So we go on to Venus and Back. She employs electronics to the music. What do you think of this album?
There's really a lot of beauty in this album as well. The song Bliss, it has this, again, I think she's kind of messing with us a little bit because Bliss, you think is going to be this happy song, but it's this very dark piano ostinato, very moody, which I really like. And this song is really about people invading your thoughts, people just getting too close and just getting into your personal space. She's got a song, Spring Haze, that's very piano driven, kind of brings us back a little bit to the earlier days. Liquid Diamond is quite a song. And you've got Matt doing some very cool drum work and a very expansive vocal range on it. There's a song called Never Seen Blue. That happens to be my favorite color, so I'm a little partial. But she has this line, and I've never seen blue like the blue he drives in and around and through me again. And it's just a beautiful love ballad.
Yeah. We've got some other people we want to mention. Can you talk about some of the other standout musicians and the artists that she's worked with? Arranger John Phillip, is it pronounced Chanel?
Yeah.
Now, he plays a big role in her career as well. So who are some of the standout musicians and even people behind the boards that play a big role in Tori's career?
So bassist John Evans is working hand in hand with Matt Chamberlain, as we just talked about. And they had come aboard for the Choir Girl Hotel in 1998. And then Evans was he was experimenting with distortion for American Doll Posse. So we're going to see these guys for 9 more albums. As a rhythm section, they really complimented Tori, and I think they gave her the freedom to really be a lounge singer, be a jazz singer. It was a safe space for experimentation, and she didn't have the pressure of always, being the pianist. Chamberlain had worked with Fiona Apple. So, I've heard musicians say, it's a little hard to work with a very creative pianist because, they're not just doing 4 to the floor. So that could be a little challenge. But I think he might have gleaned some of that from Fiona Apple, who's a very original pianist also. So John is an LA-based arranger, composer, keyboardist, programmer, so forth. He's worked with the Beach Boys, Bette Midler, Bonnie Tyler, more acts than I could even mention. And the cool thing is he's worked with Tori for over 30 years and arranged almost every album. So he knows how to use vintage or state-of-the-art equipment when he needs to. He's just really been a gem in terms of embellishing her melodies and knowing when to stay out of the way and extending harmonies. He scored for full orchestra, chamber orchestra. He used prepared piano on Under the Pink, which is when you put objects inside a piano to create a new sound. And he would also do this for Night of Hunters. And then in 2012's Gold Dust, he did this. The whole album was Tori's a lot of her classic hits reimagined with orchestra. And it's really interesting to listen to those original tracks and then listen to the tracks on Gold Dust. And then you can really, it's almost like you can appreciate what was happening because the orchestrations kind of give you a new appreciation of the range of Tori's lyrics and melodies.
Lisa Torem here to talk about her book, Tori Amos, Every Album, Every Song. Tori was consistently creating new music during the first decade of the 2000s, 7 studio albums in all, starting with 2001's Strange Little Girls, 12 tracks written and originally performed by male recording artists. What are the songs she covers on this album, and what is your overall opinion of it?
She's got quite a lineup here. She's got songs by Lou Reed, Eminem, The Stranglers, Depeche Mode, Lloyd Cole, The Emotions, Tom Waits, Boomtown Rats, The Beatles, Slayer, Joe Jackson, 10cc, and Neil Young. I mean, what a lineup. At first, I'm like, what? It just sounded like a kind of bizarre concept album. But it's quite a fascinating album. And also I was a little prejudiced because like, wait, Tori, I want your original music. Don't do this. But she really has some interesting ideas. Happiness is a Warm Gun was a pretty lengthy track, and it name checks George W. Bush. So she's kind of like political here. Her father's actually part of the vocal landscape. 97 Bonnie and Clyde, the Eminem cover. It's a very chilling, frightening track. It's like this female murder victim speaking to her daughter who is sitting in a car seat. It's like, don't take daddy's play knife. It's very eerie. There's a piece called Enjoy the Silence, Depeche Mode, and it's more simply done with Tori doing acoustic. And there's plaintive 2-part harmonies along with John Chanel's very subtle embellishments. Now, I'm not in love. I'm like, I have to admit I was a little biased because I've interviewed Graham Goldman, who was one of the co-writers. So I'm like, wait, that's the one I like. But there's some interesting choices. It has sort of this jungle beat and ambient sounds. Very stripped down in comparison to the multi-layered version of the 10cc that they're so famous for, but very different look. For Joe Jackson's Real Men, Tori's piano work, again, I think it kind of returns us to the nuance of Little Earthquakes as far as piano. She does a Tom Waits song called Time, and she kind of mirrors that very world-weary style of his. The piano is like a drone. And it's an interesting choice. The lyrics speak volumes about the human condition. But then you come to the chorus, and it's a very simple chorus resting around the title. So I've grown to appreciate the album more. I might have given it a little short shrift because I'm like, Tori, I just want your originals. But I had to expand, and she really does do some very interesting covers live and in the studio.
Now, here's one I'm curious about. If you go to Spotify, right at the top there of her most popular songs is a cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Where is that coming from? Is that a reissue of this album?
Yeah, so that I think she did that pretty early on.
Because it's not on this album, so I'm wondering where it comes from.
I think she was doing it live. And maybe it was, I'm not quite sure if it was a single, but
interesting though that it's among the most popular, and it's really good. Let's see, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Tori Amos' cover. This is from NME. Oh, deluxe reissue of debut LP. So you're right. It's an early recording.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, her cover of Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit for deluxe edition of Little Earthquakes. The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. So it's now post 9/11 when we hear Tori's next studio album, and that's 2002's Scarlet's Walk. A sort of fairy tale. And my personal pick, Taxi Ride, is a great song. Tales of a Librarian comes out in the summer of 2003. She didn't like the term greatest hits, so she referred to it as a quote-unquote sonic autobiography. She revisits the mixing of many of her own favorite songs from her career. 2 new songs, 2 re-recorded B-sides on it, including Mary and Angels, which were released as singles. So what are your thoughts overall on her early 2000s work?
Let me talk about Scarlet's Walk for a minute. There's a lot unpack here. It was based on a really fascinating premise, which was like a walk across America, and in which this protagonist, Scarlet, navigates her native roots in a kind of post 9/11 America, using these kind of vulnerable characters as narrators. Amber Waves, for example, is based on a porn star from the film Boogie Nights, and this character, just kind of speaks matter-of-factly. A Sort of Fairy Tale is a road trip song, and Scarlett puts her love interest on a pedestal, but then she faces disillusionment because the walls tumble down. It doesn't work out. So it's kind of about having this fantasy about true love, and then it doesn't work out. Tori has sort of this rubato feel in the melody, and the harmonies are just like jut in and out like pinballs. Pancake, I got pulled in by, well, the name says Macalana. It's really Mark Hawley. He's got this hypnotic guitar riff, and Matt Chamberlain's drumming is super crisp and tight. And then Tori's kind of escalating these melodic lines. You mentioned Taxi Ride. The vocals are just angelic. And it was written about a friend who died. It was a tribute to her friend, who was actually like a makeup artist, very fine makeup artist, and she was tributing him. The standout track for me is Gold Dust. It's just this gorgeous song in every way. Melodically, this is, of course, the Gold Dust album comes later, and we see all those orchestrated renditions. Every phrase is like pure poetry. The string arrangement is drop dead gorgeous. I just want to say also that Tori's maternal grandfather was Cherokee. So Native American, like educating people about the Native American culture, setting facts straight, that's very important to her. I believe she's hired researchers for this album. She wanted to educate people and talk about that experience. So you also have that in this album. Tales of a Librarian, I think it was a great opportunity to really participate in an album, and because I think as a prolific artist, there's going to be a lot of times when you say, man, I wish I could change the instrumentation on that. I wish I could change my vocal phrasing. I didn't really, give it the emotional impact it deserved. It's inevitable that an artist will feel that way. And I think this was a good opportunity for her to kind of pick the best of the best, the songs that really hadn't been given the boost that they needed. One of the songs that was on it is Jackie Strain. She wrote that about Jackie Kennedy. It's a very powerful song. There was a radio edit here. I think there was a dance tune, Armand's Star Trunk Funkin' Mix, because, some of her songs would get realized as dance mixes.
Yes. And you know what? I think that's one of the most popular tracks on Spotify as well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that is the one. Professional Widow, Armand's Star Trunk Funkin' Mix. Radio edit. Yeah, that's originally from Boys for Pele.
Yeah. So she picked some good ones like Cornflake Girl, Precious Things, all the things we want to hear over and over. God, Winter, Spark. Tear in Your Hands, another really beautiful song, very poetic. Baker Baker's one of my favorites. It's just a very pretty, haunting song, really about grieving. And I think it has to do with some of the trauma she had been through, which kind of, putting herself back together. So it was a really diverse set of songs that she included in this album. And I think it's probably fun to put together a collection and have artistic control.
She follows up with 2005's The Beekeeper, including two more adult contemporary hits, Sleeps with Butterflies and Sweet the Sting. And she found herself fascinated by the bee species. You talk about that. And the quote she included on her website, which I thought was interesting. Quote, they work with a tradition that forces you to look at those places that may need to be stung. And in order for you or I to gain the sweetness, wisdom does not come without the sting. How about that?
Yeah, it reminds me of, there was a famous phrase, the sweeter the lotus, the deeper the root. It sounds very Zen. It sounds very philosophical.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, The Beekeeper had a pretty complex story as a concept album. It's got very bold musical textures. Tori's playing a Hammond B3 for some of it. The songs were arranged in 6 different gardens. And just to give an example, one was named Roses and Thorns, one was named Herbs and Elixirs. The theme of women, insofar as relating to Christianity and spirituality, also played a role in the content. Sweet the Sting is enhanced by a London choir. And the song Sleeps with Butterflies, it keeps circling back to the theme of nature. So I think, again, she's saying, what else is there spiritually out there? And at its core, to me, this album is like a template for questions more than answers. And it kind of carries an air of mystery that runs parallel to the wonders of nature. I mean, I don't think she's answering questions. She's kind of inspiring in us the desire to ask questions about perhaps our lives. In the title song, she says, I'm the one who taps you on the shoulder when it's time. Now, this is a song about death. And she talked in an interview about music coming to her as a light filament, a shape. And she relates this to the song's architecture. Tori has a lot of ideas about songwriting. She talks about the muse speaking to her, that music sometimes comes from this place that you can't really, qualify. But it's a kind of complicated work thematically, but I kind of think you have to, rather than decipher it literally, you just make yourself aware of the influences around her and take each song as a separate entity. There's a lot of diversity here. Barons of Suburbia has mixed meter. Mother Revolution is like a battle cry from mothers who lost their kids. Ireland was inspired by James Joyce. So, Tori is always pulling from sources, either her personal life or literature, mythology, maybe Irish folklore. There's so many things that we see in each of the albums. And while the B theme is central, like I said, there's these literary and political references also that we could be aware of.
Now, she was experiencing some challenges with her label at this time, because this is her second under Epic. Was she having difficulties with them? Because you write about a major change regarding her record label. What happened? And how do you think that affected her creatively and from a commercial standpoint?
In 2001, she left Atlantic for Epic, and she released Scarlet Walk, which we talked about. There was an executive named Polly Anthony that Tori trusted. She felt she would promote her work effectively. And then a few years later, Polly Anthony left the label. So you can only imagine, it's this mentor that you believe in, and things changed. So Epic merged with BMG, and it was back to the drawing board in terms of promotion. So Tori actually formed something called the Bridge Entertainment Corps as a solution. But, I'm kind of guessing we can conclude that she would have preferred to put her time into artistic work rather than, promotional activity, which I believe most artists would want to do, given a choice. She's very attached to her music. She calls it the songs her girls. She feels strongly that songs kind of speak to her and say, I want to be on that album, or I don't. And she identifies strongly with all of her material.
From the fascination with bees to Greek mythology, which is the basis of her 9th studio album, American Doll Posse. It includes the single Big Wheel, which reached number 6 on the adult contemporary charts. How does Greek mythology help to shape the songs on this album?
It's another concept album, and Tori creates 5 female prototypes drawn from the principles of Greek mythology. It's Isabel, Clyde, Pip, Santa, and Tori. The themes include anti-war, sexism, disillusionment, empowerment, lots of stuff to unpack here. The theme is carried out visually on the album, the minute you see this album, and even on tour, Tori dresses up in character garb. So it's interesting because there's this balance of it's levity and gravity in the way that this album comes across. She's kind of playful. She's dressing as the characters. The characters, some are sloppy, some are meticulous, some are glamour queens. They each have a distinct personality. Even on the records, it'll say, sung by Pip. Bouncing Off Clouds was the lead single. And it's just got this growling piano riff. Big Wheel was what I consider perhaps her biggest or maybe only nod to Americana. So she leaves no prisoners when she's showing her country girl sass. It's just really this different side of Tori I haven't heard before. It's like a saloon singer in a country western bar or something. It's great. It's so fun. And I can't say we're going to hear this again. It was like a one-off. Girl Disappearing is a really beautiful song. It features John Philip Chanel's string arrangement. There's kind of an inconsistency among the track lanes for people that are really type A about that. There's a song called Pips by, Pip is singing this one. Fat Slut, clocking in at only 41 seconds. There's Isabel's Devils and Gods at 53 seconds. But then there's Code Red at 5:27. But you think about the history of pop music, and you think about those leftover pieces in Sgt. Pepper that were so charming, So who's to say whether they have to be equal length? There's a wide berth in terms of keyboard instrumentation again. Bill Bosendorfer, which she's very faithful to, but she's leaving space for Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzer, clavichord, and mellotron. So again, we get a lot of variety.
She continues to stretch out creatively as she's now in her, how many years has she been doing it by then, by 2007. So that's what's cool too, is she's not just writing the same album over and over again. She's still stretching out.
There's a great deal of thought in every album, whether it's a concept album, whether it's return to very personal work. she's got a team, and she takes very seriously the visual image of her albums, and like I said, she has such experts that she works with that have her back. But yeah, I think she's very serious about what she's conveying to her fans and how she's relating. And it's funny though, because there's sites where they'll just talk for hours about, what did Tori mean by this? What did Tori mean?
Oh, I can imagine.
And in many cases, fans will say, that song healed me. I was going through a really hard time. There was a song called Bells for Her, Under the Pink, which is where John Philip Snell did a prepared piano arrangement. So it had a very kind of interesting piano sound in the background. And Tori's singing sort of these really interesting fragments, phrases. And it's a very haunting song about a female friendship disintegrating. And fans would say, this song saved my life. And they say that about some other, it saved my life. It was a healing song. And you see this a lot. And you hear fans really commiserating, really trusting her.
How about the next two albums? She records a couple after she signs a distribution deal with Universal Republic Records. Abnormally Attracted to Sin, and then Midwinter Graces. A number 10 adult contemporary radio single comes with Welcome to England from Abnormally Attracted to Sin. Now you write, quote, so much had changed. Tori had moved unquestionably ahead in her career, married and had a child. There were incidents left to mourn, but many to celebrate. What is the result musically and lyrically on these two albums?
Abnormally Attracted to Sin is a return to Tori's personal life. And she began writing the songs during the American Doll Posse tour and then completed the songs in 2008. She returned to Los Angeles, and this was a big deal because this is where she was revisiting her old haunts. There was, she revisited the church that was close to the apartment she had. All these places, but of course there were bad memories as well. She was promoting a novel at Comic-Con, and that was one of the reasons she was there. Many of the themes center around feelings of isolation and depression, so the dark side of family life that people rarely discuss openly. One of my favorites is a film noir arrangement called That Guy, and Tori just has this sultry, undulating vocal performance. It turns coy, it's provocative, it's sweet. There's this king-size modulation, and which ushers in a whole new series of sonics. There's a song, Lady in Blue. It's about 7+ minutes. It's another stunner. There's electronic instruments and flute shade Tori's mood. She sounds a little bit like she's at the edge of her head voice, a little bit at the edge of her most comfortable range, which I think gives it another kind of nightclubby feeling. And there's kind of this tearful ennui, sort of like a glamorous Hollywood star was like, well, I'm a little tired of this, guys. But there's also this explosive all on board outro, which is just incredible. Oh, by the way, That Guy, fans out there, if you don't know Tori's music, you have to listen to this. It's just perfect for a James Bond film. It's just like, it's got it all. It's got a little sense of mystery. It's the lyrics are a little bit, like, who's this person they're talking about? And it's got this kind of 60s vibe.
Oh, cool. I got to give that one a listen.
Super, super cool. And then Midwinter Graces is the closest Tori has come to producing a seasonal album. So she had one of her mentors was Jewish, but he said, you know what? I love so many things about holiday music. And I'm kind of wondering, could you do an album that's not like specifically talking about, elements of faith, but that kind of work around, the compositional structures or the ancient kind of things without like deliberately talking about Santa or things like that. So it's based on traditional songs with a few originals thrown in for good measure. She researched the field of songs that were already out there. And of course, she had come up through the church, so she was familiar with hymns and carols and pop and folk, and just through her years of being a musician. There's some variations on familiar themes. Like there's a song, What Child Noel, which is kind of like Greensleeves, the old English song Greensleeves. And it's embellished with harpsichord and light percussion. Another song, Our New Year. It's very it's a gentle ballad, but it builds to a very rich crescendo. I know a lot of people might say, well, I only listen to holiday music during the holidays. Okay, that's fair. So I probably would only listen to this during the holidays, but there are some really beautiful cuts on it. And I would say, listen to it.
The second half of the 2000s includes the albums Night of Hunters, that's 2011, Gold Dust, 2012, Unrepentant, Geraldine's, 2014, Native Invader, 2017, and Ocean to Ocean, which we mentioned. That's her latest album, came out in 2021. And there's an amazing statistic you cite in the book that leads off the chapter on Night of Hunters. Tori earned the status of becoming the first female artist to place an album in the top 10 of the classical, alternative, and rock charts simultaneously.
This is one big ask because this label, Deutsche Grammophon, is one of our oldest record labels. By the way, just for some fun pop culture stuff, there was an album with Tony Sheridan and the Beatles that they did. And they've had their hands in many different albums, a lot of classical artists and some other odds and ends. So the label came to her and said, we envisioned this album where you would do song cycles based on a series of composers that, dead composers 400 years ago, people like Eric Satie, Bach, Chopin, so forth, Granados. And you would base these song cycles on these instrumentalist works, but come up with your own stories. So there's some very complex stories in there. And she was a little nervous, frankly, because, she had gone from classical to rock and pop and so forth. It wasn't like she was studying classical all these years. So she had to be reintroduced to the classical world. And it was extremely successful. There was a lot to do. John Philip Chanel took a huge part in this, like creating arrangements. There was a clarinet piece that was like a dueling piece between vocals and clarinet. I mean, just some really tremendous moments. It's been called a classical crossover, because it is, like you said, the three categories.
Yeah, that's the genre that they actually call it, classical crossover. It is a genre. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's strings and there's woodwinds. She also produced a Spanish language version. It's called Night of Hunters Sin Palabras, which means without words. So, there's so much to take from that album. I think that was a really good idea. Again, experimenting. Night of Hunters was so interesting because there was dissonance, there were experimental figures, there were conventional voicings. There was a free-flowing spirit around some of the narratives. But like I say, it was very tough to pull off, and I believe she reigned. She said that she was influenced by her marriage to Mark and where that relationship stood in terms of the outside world. So you get the personal, and then you get sort of the epic, narratives that she pulls from Ireland and folklore and so many other sources. Native Invader, it's a very mature album. Mary's Eyes is an especially insightful song. Tori was grieving. Her mother had a stroke and she couldn't speak. So Tori just threw herself very emotionally into this song. There's very seamless sections, and she explores the entire range of the piano. Russia, it's like a clarion call for humanity, like get your act together. It's pretty relevant, with acoustic piano being like the role of a sincere second voice. Like I said, with Ocean to Ocean, I think it's a gem. It's very balanced. It's brimming with sweeping strings, socially conscious themes. I think she'll probably tour whether she does another album or not. But I just want to go back a little bit to the fun side of Tori. There's a song called Spies on Ocean to Ocean, and she has this playful side. So she writes about an aardvark. She says, in spattered dashes with a plaid umbrella. She's describing this aardvark character. And I'm like, okay, is that like, I know she likes EE comics. She's making up a word. So I looked it up, and it's a 17th century accessory for footwear, so you don't get splashed in the mud. Yeah, and she likes to add little hippopotamuses and aardvarks and zebras in some of her songs. But I'm like, oh, did she make up that word? So I found out, well, this is the word that the word spats came from. So here's Tori, like she's a word fanatic,
She does have, according to her website, she's got dates scheduled.
Yes.
For this Ocean to Ocean album. She's out promoting that. Now, I can't imagine why she wouldn't want to continue to record, because she just seems to this day just continually inspired. So I can't imagine she wouldn't. So looking forward to that. But I want to finish. Now, I got to ask you about the photo in your book of your daughters, Allison and Emily. And the caption reads, "The author's daughters, Allison and Emily, who met Tori Amos." You got to tell us the story. When did they get to meet her? And you met her twice. When did they get to meet her?
I think one of the reasons that I relate to Tori's music is she sees the Sturm und Drang in everyday routines. Okay, so this is a sort of everyday story. She was on the Chicago leg of her Little Earthquakes tour at the Park West in 1992 in July, which is a mid-sized venue. She had just been previously at a smaller club called Shuba's in Chicago. So, you can see she's going up in fame and she's getting to larger venues. During that time, I was a freelancer and I was caretaking for these little girls, but I was feeling like maybe how many parents feel, very isolated from the bigger culture out there, kind of in this world of caretaking, not really running out to concerts and doing all this fun stuff. So the concert at Shuba's had been completely sold out, and I had read about Tori, and I was so anxious. I know, but this time I had listened to Little Earthquakes hundreds of times. It's sort of like a teenage girl. I would listen to Winter or Silence all these years. I'd be like, you go there and you just say, I'm gonna have a good time. Keep listening to these songs. So I really wanted to see her on this evening, and I had a babysitter. I never was able to get a babysitter. Finally, I didn't have family in town. I got a babysitter, but I didn't have tickets. So I went to Park West in the afternoon. It was a very typically hot, humid July summer day. And I went to the box office and they were completely sold out. I don't know. What was I thinking? Okay. Time management issues. What was I thinking? They were completely sold out. My children were very whiny. I ran over to Ben and Jerry's, which is no longer there, to get them ice cream.
Yes.
They look like we all look like a complete mess. I mean, ice cream, bubblegum ice cream.
All right. You didn't get Cherry Garcia?
Oh God, right? All over the clothes. And we look like a hot mess with, more, that's an understatement. So we sat on the steps, and because I was just kind of really bummed out. And suddenly, it's like a magical moment. I see these black high tops bouncing, and she does bouncing up with white laces, bouncing up the steps. And this voice says to me, why do you look so sad? So I'm literally not in the real world at this point. I didn't realize it was Tori Amos.
Get out.
And she's bouncing out of the taxi, literally bouncing out of a taxi up the stairs to go to sound check. I later found out she was going to sound check. It was about 3-4 in the afternoon. And I just hardly even looked up. The sun was right in my eyes. And I said, well, I'm like a whiny kid myself. The concert's sold out and I'm looking really glum. Didn't want to go home. I was just kind of paralyzed. And she whisks me off to the box office. She gets me 2 tickets for that night. And I felt like I'd been sprinkled with fairy dust.
That is so cool.
And by the time I got the words out to thank her, she'd run off, like a fairy princess. So, it happened so quickly. And I think I was sort of in a state of shock. I really didn't properly thank her. But the other thing was, she not only got me great seats. I played piano. My dad played piano. I grew up with a piano. She got me a seat so I could watch her play piano.
Wow.
I love watching an artist play piano.
Yeah.
And so I could watch her shape her chords. And she did 10 tracks, mostly from Little Earthquakes. Of course, that was her album. 2 encores. You were talking about Smells Like Teen Spirit and Angie by the Stones. She did 2 covers.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
4 songs, but 2 covers. Now, I just want to add to that I did raise them to become Tori fans, because in 1996, another hot, humid day, I was playing Blood Roses pretty loudly, way up, cranked up.
Yeah.
And with the car window down. Blood Roses is okay, maybe not that appropriate for a little girl. Anyway, I'm playing Blood Roses, and my girls are singing along at the top. We're all singing along the top of our lungs. And it's a red light, and this lady gives me the filthiest look, like, what are you? But they're Tori fans, and that was the goal. So
yeah. Now, this picture that's in the book.
This was years later. This was
gotcha. Okay.
Later, yeah. So they were really kind of they were pretty young at that first. Now they don't remember, unfortunately, meeting Tori, but they've listened to a lot of cranked up radio. So raised them well.
Well, people can see the picture in the book, and they can read all about Tori Amos. It'll get you caught up right up until the very last album. The book is out now. It is Tori Amos, Every Album, Every Song. If you live in the UK, it's probably best to get it through burningshed.com. In the US, through Amazon, and any websites you want to let people know about. Social media. I know we're now, I think we're on Instagram. We're friends on Facebook, I think.
I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I think I'm just like Lisa Torem. And that's sort of it. I'm trying to get a website, but it might take a little bit of time.
That'd be fun. Do a blog, maybe?
Maybe.
Cool.
Yeah. By the way, I'm coming out with a book on Suzanne Vega.
Suzanne Vega. Okay. When is that?
It'll be out probably in August in the UK and maybe a few months later in the US.
Okay. So we'll have you back on for that one.
Sounds amazing.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it. It's in the books.